Have you ever wanted to go back to the Dark Souls 1 to 3 meta of simply pressing R1 and maybe R2? Just joyfully doing running attacks non-stop, or in this case, crouching attacks. Well, boy do I have a weapon for you. So this is a pretty standard level 150 DLC build. If I was going to redo anything, I would actually shift 2 of the points from Vigor into Endurance. That would probably let me use another light weapon such as a claw. Raptor Talons are still good. Or even use like, let's say, a buckler in my offhand. But overall, for the arena, this setup is fine. Later in the video, I will have my invasion setup, which is level 117, and maybe we'll talk about that a little. So I think in previous patches before the DLC, Serpent Hunter was kind of that weapon. And that weapon allowed you to basically use its crouch poke, its running attack, its standing R1, and its jumping R1, two-handed. And so basically all of these attacks had armor. And this is pretty important because it would allow you to stop your opponent from mashing. You would kind of put them in a vortex with the crouch poke versus standing poke versus jumping attack. And Rakshasa actually fulfills a lot of the same playstyle. In fact, I think in some ways it's actually an improvement. It has more range, it has even more poking attacks that can take advantage of Spear Talisman, and it actually has great hammer tier hyper armor, which is pretty wild for a weapon up its speed and length. So given that we know that, we could actually really abuse that hyper armor, as you'll see in this clip. You could play so ignorant if you actually feel like it. Tracking on the running R1 is pretty notable for all great katanas, but this one actually has more armor, so you'll be less likely to be interrupted. And as you saw there, he mashed, I mashed, but I just had more hyper armor. But with any, let's say, normal attack-centric setup, you should definitely be aware of your opponent's ability to parry you. So there, I just got way too greedy. I think if I had like mixed it up and done like, let's say, a jumping R2 or a jumping R1, just anything that wasn't like parryable, or just charged up R2, I think that probably would have been fine. The charge R2 of Spear Talisman is pretty strong too. I've gotten over 1,000 damage with this setup. Another weakness of builds like this is basically contesting hyper armor with something bigger, so in this case a colossal sword. And while I did beat this guy in this match, he definitely beat me in a couple other games because he adapted. And here he got greedy, he was trying to mash out, but this weapon actually does decent poise damage, so it was able to interrupt him a couple times there. In general, if you see hyper armor, you're going to have to play like fairly defensively. You're going to have to just wait for them to whiff and then punish that or go for a backstab. Basically, just never let them have the advantage of using that hyper armor against you. I'm not really sure what this guy was doing with his setup. It looked like he's power stancing scythes, but it just didn't connect. I'm just going to assume he was fooling around. And this was a really good fight. I enjoyed this a lot. So I thought he was going to be like a dagger spammer, and then he took out Fire Knight Greatsword, which is a really nice ultra greatsword. It's got the Zwei moveset, and it scales very well in Faith builds. It's decent on strength too, but the Art Flame Spear does actually scale on Faith. But yeah, I had run a similar setup using the Fire Knight short sword in my offhand, but I don't know, I just felt that I wanted to two-hand the Rakshasa. And it's pretty down to the wire here, actually. And as soon as I saw him use the consumable, I should have just rolled, or at least rolled more. I got greedy and I went in for like a jumping strike with a dagger, but it was pretty close. I enjoyed that fight a lot. And yes, even with the 77 base poise health plus my 116 poise, your poise can still be broken by power stance setups occasionally. like certain attacks from this hit multiple times. And see, there I was trying to go through it, but didn't really work out too well. However, I was able to trade in and get a few hits, which just let me get the win with a single jump attack at the end. Yeah, the base damage on this thing is pretty crazy. I think it's like over 740 without using like Rakshasa or any attack boost. So he whiffs his parry, I get the crouch poke anyway. Jump in and trade, but it doesn't matter, he's almost dead. And I should have actually jump attacked again there because he just woke up and did R1. If he had woke up and parried it, would have probably caught me, but just something to keep in mind. The jump attacks are pretty good. The R2 has really good range to catch, like, let's say, back rolls. And the R1 has a decent horizontal hitbox. So here I'm making some mistakes. I just kind of traded into his crap, and I was pretty surprised that that didn't kill him, but I figured he would wake up and mash, so did a jump R2, and sealed it up. I guess now we're getting into the invasion part of the video. So this build is level 117, that's 117, so I could avoid meta level 150, but it hits like everything short of that, so let's say like 110 down to 148. And of course, my first invasion, it's a 3-man with multiple mages. And yeah, man, I despise that weapon, the Sword of Damnation. Because even if they whiff it, they can still clip you with that massive AoE. But luckily, the DLC enemies are pretty strong, so getting even like 1 or 2 of them to aggro on them can take a lot of pressure off of you. And my god, this guy's so damn cheap. The Thorn spell, dude. But most annoying party member down, so now it's just down to the last guy. And oh my god, that running attack counter with the Spear Talisman, 922. I think he just had terrible physical defense, but even then, it's really meaty for what it is. And this is back in the gravesite plane. These guys are like right where the Blessed Dew Talisman is. I don't think he ever picked it up. This guy's just going Harambe on my backside of the Bear Claws, but I'm trying to stay patient here, and of course we're not trying to get hit by the Adula's Moonblade. Kind of have my spidey sense kick in, I dodged that. So that one counterattack did some good damage there. And so one thing to note is that the L2 is pretty bad. As you saw, like both hits connected and did less than 600 damage. It does have hyper armor on startup, that is true. However, the recovery is not great. It could be parried and it has less range than you think. Like the use case is, oh, what if multiple low life targets are rushing me? The chance of that is pretty low, and you will trade anyway. So there's a high chance you're going to die if multiple people are mashing on you and you're trying to use the L2 to peel them. I did not have like any success using that art. You know, stuff like crouch poke, running attack chains, and your jump attacks, those are going to serve you well. And even the R2. But the L2 on this weapon, not very good. Oh. And I kind of like underestimated how long some of these invasions went. I only saved the last minute because it only felt like it was like 1 minute and 30 seconds. But I was rolling around dodging moon veils and projectiles for a whole nother like minute or two before I got the jump on these guys finally. And if you're in this zone, if you're in Bellarat near the well, or sorry, fountain, you want to just kind of back up and like aggro some of these guys on them. And again, it's not like they do huge damage, but just anything to put that little buffer between you and them so that you can get a hit in. And so I expected him to wake up mash there, he didn't, but he gets caught by 2 crouch pokes. Man, the turnaround time of that's pretty good. So I was trying out the Claws of Night, and I have learned that you free aim those to get the maximum value out of the art, but I basically just wanted to have a stronger throwing dagger or fan daggers. And here's where I try to use the L2, right? So I just want to see just how much poise damage it could do, but I don't think this guy has Bull Goat on, and he's using like the Knight set. But here's my build. I'm using 3-piece Rakshasa with the Solitude chest to achieve 101 poise, which will stop Flaming Strike and a few other arts that do 100 poise damage. And you have a lot of choices for your talisman. You could use, let's say, the Running Talisman, the Crouch Poke Talisman, Spear Talisman, or even the Life Up Talisman. And also the 3 pieces of Rakshasa are giving you about 6% more attack power, which is about 40 AR in this case, which is a lot. That's the equivalent of like 15 stat points. Pretty worth it. But overall, I hope that you enjoyed watching these clips, you learned something about the weapon, and I'll see you guys next time on the next video.